We'll see how it goes. So I'm Pastor Jason's son. Most of you might know me, but if you don't know me, I went here for the first 21 years of my life. While I lived with my parents, I came here almost every Sunday, and I've been blessed to hear so many of my dad's sermons. Been blessed by so much of the ministry at Montrose. Montrose is, as I would say, would be one of the part, if I look back, would be a foundation of my childhood and a big part of my childhood and growing up. And I'm very appreciative to everybody here. Some of you that I've known since I was a kid, since I was that big. I'm thankful for this opportunity to preach here. And also, happy anniversary to my mom and my dad. My mom, I don't know if she's there, but happy anniversary to you guys. So today, today's the last day of 2023, and as we look back on the past year and we look forward to the new year, I wanted to preach about miracles. God is a God of miracles. And what I really want before I preach the message is for each of us have specific situations in our life that only we know that where we need God. And it could be great, it could be small. The problems, it could be big problems, need of healing. It could be smaller problems, but miracles come in all shapes and sizes in each of us. And so that's what I'm gonna talk about today is what to do when you're praying for a miracle, what to do when you're hoping and praying to God for deliverance, for a miracle in your life. So today we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 14. I made the mistake. I'm preaching from the NIV, but I brought my Bible, which is the NLT. So I'll be using the electronic Bible today. So that's okay. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. So Exodus chapter 14, and we're going to be starting at verse 5. And then I have the NIV version. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi Hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. And they are to encamp by the sea directly opposite of Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain the glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, and the Israelites did this." When the king of Egypt was told that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he sent his chariot and made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots chariots of Egypt along with him, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, horsemen, and troops pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped near Pi Hahiroth, opposite of Baal Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there was the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said, "Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." And Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you will see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. All you need to do is be still." And so today, as we are looking at what to do when we are praying to God for a miracle, what I want to point out is for the Israelites is how their situation, it was impossible. They had just been delivered from the land of Egypt. Pharaoh had just delivered them through the 12 plagues that just came to Pharaoh. And after 12 times of God repeatedly showing Pharaoh, "I'm more powerful than you. I'm all powerful. You can't do anything, no matter how strong you are. you are not more powerful than me. No matter how many times God showed him, he still kept on trying to bring the Israelites back into slavery in Egypt. And it wasn't until after the 12th plague that Pharaoh finally, he said, okay, I'll let you guys go. So he lets them go, and God delivers Israel, and God leads them to the Red Sea. And they're trapped up against the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a big body of water. There's a lot of people in the nation of Israel. There's nowhere for them to go. And then Pharaoh changes his mind. He says, I've let you go, but I want you back. And, I think when I was reading this passage, I just thought of all the times where I've been trying my own way, and God's repeatedly shown me this is not going to work, and every time, and then I keep falling on my face. I keep failing because I'm not doing it God's way. As Pharaoh, so Pharaoh goes back. He tries to, he goes after them, and they're completely trapped. On one side, they have the sea. On the other side, they have the Egyptian army. At the time in the ancient world, the Egyptian army was one of the most powerful armies in the whole world. They had chariots. They had all these warriors. And the Israelites, they had just escaped slavery. They had a lot of women and children. They didn't have any warriors. They didn't have anything that they needed to fight against the Egyptians. And so for them to fight the Egyptians would be stupid. It would not be a good idea. So on one side you have the sea, on the other side you have the army coming after them, and they're in an impossible situation. They're completely trapped. But then God comes to them and he says, I will fight for you. All you do is have to be still. So God tells them to be still. And I don't know about you, but that would be so hard for me to hear. At first they died. And a lot of the times when you hear people talk about this story, they're talking about how the Israelites died. And yeah, they should have died. I'm not saying they should have, but if I can't say that I would have done anything different, because that was the situation that they were in was so hard, so impossible. In their human understanding, there was no way out. And so the first thing I want to talk about when praying for a miracle is when God calls us to stay still. Because there's going to be times when God calls us to stay. We're praying and God says, you know what? I want you to take your hands off the situation and let me work. And so my first point is when God calls us to stand still. Before the miracle, there must also be a need. And when the need is impossible, when we can't see a solution, it forces us to trust in God. And oftentimes God brings us to a point where we are so desperate that it forces us to trust him. Like the Israelites here, they're forced to look to God. There's no other solution. They couldn't do anything else. And you think of times in your life, I think of times in my life when I'm in the same scenario where everything I tried, everywhere I look, there's no way out. I've dug myself a hole again, made stupid mistakes, and there's no way out. And I'm forced to look to God. So sometimes God's going to bring us to a point where he asks us to be still to do that, to strengthen our relationship with him and force us to put our trust in him. And then the second thing, when God tells us to be still, is he's telling us to take a step back. Sometimes it's easy when you are in an impossible situation, when your need is so great, to just surge ahead. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to fight or flight response, some people, they might run away from the problems, but I'm the person, I want to just attack it right away and just don't take a step back, just go into it and not even thinking, just full steam ahead. And that's a lot of the times what I've learned in my life is the importance of taking a step back. And I believe that's what God was doing for the Israelites here, to take a step back and to wait for his word on what to do. Because if they would have gone, they could have said, I believe God is with me. I'm going to go and fight the Egyptians. And, God, and I'm going to defeat them. But that's not what God said. That wasn't the direction that God told him. God told him to be still. I will fight for you. Be still. So there's going to be a lot of times where God tells us to be still when we're praying for a miracle. When we're in need of deliverance, God tells us to be still and let him fight. But there's also going to be times where God calls us to step out in faith. And so continue with me in your Bibles in verse 16. In verse 15. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through on the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain the glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I bring the glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So here God tells them to be still. And while they're being still, the Egyptian army is coming after them. But then God tells them to take action. And God tells Moses, he says, put your rod in the sea, put your rod in the sea, and he will part the water. And the Israelites are to walk through on dry ground so that they are able to escape the pursuit of the Egyptian army. And God may be calling you to wait for a season, but when he does give you the call to action, you must step out in faith. You must step out in faith. God parted the Red Sea, but the people still had to take that step. The people still had to walk through. And one thing I want to point out about when the people walked through on the dry ground through the sea, first of all, that's amazing. I just want you to imagine that. I don't think there's another time in all of human history that's ever been done. That's supernatural. That's all God, all God. And it's just amazing to think about. But one thing the Bible says is that God sent a strong wind to hold up each side of the Red Sea. So each side, a strong wind that would separate the water so that the Israelites could pass through on dry ground. And so as it was supernatural, it was also, God is a God of order, and he caused it through nature. He caused the Red Sea to part. So the only thing holding up the Red Sea from crashing back down to the Israelites as they walked through would have been a strong wind. And so I just want you to imagine yourself in the Israelites' situation. That would have been terrifying, because if that wind stops, while you're walking through, the walls are going to come back down, and they're going to crash on you and destroy the entire nation of Israel. So obviously, the faith that it takes to walk through, and this just isn't just like a small journey. It's not like, okay, I walked through a 30-minute walk and I'm there. No, this probably took days to get, they have the women, children, all the people, all the supplies they're carrying with them, and all their families. It probably took days to get across, and the whole time they have to, each step is a step of faith. And so some miracles, they might happen right away, and that's great. Some miracles happen right away, but a lot of the times our miracles take time. When we're praying for miracles, it takes time. And when God calls us to step out of faith, it's not just a quick fix, but it's a walk that takes time, and it takes perseverance, and it takes faith. And when God gave the word for them to move forward, when God gave the word for them to step out of faith, they had to do it. They could not stay put. If they would have stayed put, God could have opened the Red Sea, but if they would have said, God just told us to be still. I want to stay still a little bit longer. Even though God had clearly worked a miracle part of the Red Sea, they would have been overtaken. And so they would have been overtaken by the Egyptian army. So even though God may call you to be still, as God said previously, when God opens up the door, when God opens the door for you, you have to be willing to step through immediately in God's timing. You cannot be afraid, because if you're afraid, I think back in times in my own life where I've been praying for something, I know God's calling me to wait, but then God finally opens that door. God finally gives me what I'm praying for, and I don't go. I don't go. And if they would have waited, they would have got overtaken by the Egyptians. It didn't matter what God did. So it's so important that you have to move forward. You have to step out in faith. Psalm 23, that's Psalm 23 verse 4 says, even in the valley of the darkest shadow, I will fear no evil. That's one of that verse has been really powerful in my life. I know in a lot of people's lives, that verse is really powerful, because just a reminder that whatever you're going through, God is with you. But I was listening to a sermon 2 weeks ago. I was listening to a sermon, and they were talking about the valley of the darkest shadow. How when you think of a valley, it's there's a low place, right? And when you're in the valley, there's a low place. But at the end of each valley, on each side, is a summit, is a climb, or there's a way out of each valley. And I thought that was so beautiful, because if you stay put in the valley, you're going to stay in the valley forever. You know, if you stay put in the valley, you're going to stay there. You could stay there for the rest of your life. And that's such a sad thing to think about. But if you keep moving forward, you know, sometimes you might not feel like you have the strength. Sometimes you might not feel like you have the courage to keep moving forward. But God promises to give that to you. As long as you make that decision, you personally make that decision, you say, I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to keep going forward. I'm going to trust in God for the strength. I'm going to trust in God for provision. And eventually, God's going to bring you out of it. But it has to be step by step. It's not just one step. It's step by step until God brings you out. So point number one, sometimes when you're praying for a miracle, God's going to tell you to stay still, take a step back, put your trust in Him. Other times, God's going to be calling you to take a step of faith to walk in action when you're praying for your miracle, right? Walk through the door He has opened for you. So what I want to talk to you is how to discern where God is leading, because I think that's one of the most important things when you're praying for what to do. What should I do? Is, okay, how should I follow God's leading? One thing I've learned is that you can't expect God to answer you if you're only going to Him in times that you need Him. I used to think that I could come to God and He would give me wisdom if I only came to Him in moments of desperation. And I would only go read my Bible in moments of desperation, only pray to Him in moments of desperation. I thought that He would come and answer me. And I'm not saying He can't. God can do anything. God can work in any way that is not dependent on what we do. But what I realized, especially in the past year of my life, is who am I to expect God to, whether I be praying for wisdom, whether I be praying for deliverance in my life, who am I to expect God to answer my prayers or to give me clarity of what He's telling me to do if it's not a two-way relationship? You know, God loves us so much that He wants a real love with us. He doesn't want a one-way love. And that's why He doesn't force us to come to Him. He doesn't force us. He can save everybody if He wants to, but He's not going to force us to come to Him, because He wants us to experience what true love with Jesus feels like, what true love with Jesus feels like, and that's a two-way relationship. And when I realized that, it's so powerful, because you think, because that's something I'm struggling with is God, why don't you save everybody? Why don't you deliver me every time I'm in trouble? Why do bad things happen? And I realized that I really realized that God desires that two-way relationship with us so much that sometimes it takes us, bad things happening in our life, us making mistakes without Him, God allowing us to make mistakes to bring us to Him. And so when we're praying for wisdom, we're praying for guidance. We're praying for wisdom and guidance on what God has for us to do, what He wants us to do. It's so important that we are seeking Him all the time, not just when we need Him, right? Not just when we need Him. And I really do believe that when I've seen in my own personal life that when you seek God, that He will give you clarity and wisdom on what you should do. Because there's going to be a lot of voices in your head. There's going to be your own voice. There's going to be the enemy's voice. There's going to be other people's voice, then God's voice. And it's so hard to know what God's leading you to do. You could feel a certain way, but it's so hard to. And so I really do believe, you seek God and God will give you the answer. But you have to be seeking Him all the time. You have to be strengthening that relationship with Him every day, no matter what, in good times and bad times. And so the last thing about miracles that I want to talk about when you're praying for a miracle is miracles happen to bring God the glory. Miracles happen to bring God the glory. God doesn't always take the easiest, the most efficient route to accomplish His purpose. He didn't have to lead the Israelites to the Red Sea. He could have led them around the Red Sea. He didn't. When God delivered the people from Egypt, He led them directly into a trap, and He didn't have to do that. He could have easily led them around the Red Sea, and this whole story would have never happened, right? He didn't have to do that. And you think about your own life. God didn't have to lead you into that trial. God didn't have to, but when God, and sometimes it's hard for us when we're in the trial, when we're in the valley, when we're in need to see. It's hard for us to see why God is doing it. But when He brings us out, He gets so much more glory. And the bigger the setback, the bigger the glory that God gets. And it was God who hardened the heart of Pharaoh. When not only did God lead them to the Red Sea, but God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. It was God who sent Pharaoh after them. It was God. In the Bible, it says that God was the one who caused Pharaoh to go after the Israelites. And I just think it's at first, when you read it, it's confusing. But then when you really realize it's a very beautiful thing, how God will get the glory through whatever we go through. And another thing when it comes to getting the glory is that the people of Israel, after they crossed the Red Sea and they had that miracle and they were delivered from the Egyptians, for generations, for hundreds, thousands of years, they would look back. They had something that they could look back on and say, God was faithful to me then. God will be faithful to me now. In Psalms, David talks about it. In Corinthians, Paul talks about it. And it's something that, you look back, just such a big event. And even for us today, we can look back on whether it be the Red Sea or even something in our own life, where God brought us through. At the time, it was tough, but when God brought us through, we can look back and say, okay, God was with me then, God's going to be with me now. And the last thing is that miracles happen to bring other people to God. Miracles happen in our life. God uses miracles in our life to bring other people to God as a testimony. Again, when we're in the middle of a trial, a miracle can't happen without a need. A miracle can't happen without a trial, without a season where we're going through the valley of the darkest shadow, right? When we're going through that really tough time. A miracle can't happen without it. And when we're in it, it's so hard to realize God's reason for it. But when we come out, we can not only give God the glory, or God will get the glory, but we also have something that we can look back on and remind us of God's deliverance, but also that we can give it as a testimony to other people who might not know Jesus and who are looking to come to Him, so we can show them, this is my God. This is the God that I serve. This is the God that I have in my life that I know I can turn to whenever. I can call upon His name whenever. I can talk to whenever. And this is the God who has my back, who is living in my life and is active in my life. And the same God, when we read the stories of the Bible, the same God that parted the Red Sea, the same God that caused the wind to drive back the water, the same God that caused the 12 plagues on the nation of Egypt, the most powerful nation at the time, to deliver God's people. That same God that is so powerful and supernatural and in control of all things, all powerful, wants a relationship with us today and wants to be in our lives today. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And any chance I get, I love to talk about Jesus, because I see so many people that don't have Jesus, and it really hurts me to see that, because Jesus, He offers purpose, Jesus offers hope, Jesus offers strength, He offers provision and protection, and for a while I didn't really understand that, because I would just go to church and how people say, I knew about Jesus, but I didn't know Jesus. And I think it's easy if you go to church, or maybe I don't know what level you are in your walk with Jesus, or your relationship with Jesus. I don't know what level you're at, but I think it's easy to forget who God really is. And God is a God of love. He's a God of purpose, and I don't know if you feel like maybe I don't know what your situation is going into the new year, but I want to let you know that God has whatever you need. God's the solution to any problem, and pray to Him. And He wants to be there for each and every one of you. And all He asks is that you come to Him. And so that's my sermon for today. So if you were praying for a miracle. If you're praying for a miracle, first, there's going to be times where God tells you to be still. Second, there's going to be times where God tells you to take action. Third, God will give the glory, and God will use what you're going through as a testimony. When you're delivered, God will use it as a testimony for other people to share the love of Jesus. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.